When news broke that the Brentwood Police Department had opened a preliminary investigation into allegations against Michael Tait, it marked a significant turning point in what's become one of the most serious scandals to hit the Christian music industry. I've been following this story closely, and what strikes me most isn't just the gravity of the allegations themselves, but how law enforcement is handling what appears to be an incredibly complex case spanning multiple decades. The Brentwood Police Department, located just south of Nashville in Tennessee, doesn't take on cases like this lightly. When we talk about a preliminary investigation, we're looking at the initial phase where detectives are gathering information, interviewing potential witnesses, and determining whether there's enough evidence to move forward with formal charges. This isn't a quick process, especially when dealing with allegations that allegedly occurred over 20 years ago. What makes this investigation particularly challenging is the time frame we're dealing with. The alleged incidents date back to 1999, 2000, and 2003. That's a significant gap between when these events allegedly took place and when they're being reported to law enforcement. From an investigative standpoint, this creates unique obstacles. Physical evidence becomes nearly impossible to collect, witness memories can fade or become less reliable, and the legal landscape around these types of crimes has evolved considerably since then. But here's what's interesting about how this is unfolding. The victims aren't working in isolation. They've coordinated their efforts, which actually strengthens the potential case from a law enforcement perspective. When multiple alleged victims come forward with similar accounts spanning different time periods, it can establish what prosecutors call a pattern of behavior. This is crucial in cases where individual incidents might be difficult to prove on their own. The Brentwood Police Department's Criminal Investigations Division is handling this case, and they're experienced with complex investigations. Their approach appears methodical. They're asking victims to come forward rather than rushing to make arrests or file charges immediately. This suggests they understand the complexity of what they're dealing with and want to build the strongest possible case before moving to the next phase. One thing that's notable is how the victims are actively participating in this process. Sean Davis, who's been the most vocal, has made it clear that he's working directly with law enforcement to press charges. That level of cooperation is significant because these types of cases often rely heavily on victim testimony, especially when dealing with older alleged incidents where physical evidence may not exist. The investigation is also happening in an environment where there is intense public scrutiny. Christian music has a massive following, and Michael Tait was a prominent figure in that community through his work with DC Talk and the Newsboys. Law enforcement has to balance the need for a thorough investigation with the reality that every move they make is being watched by the public, the media, and potentially thousands of fans who are struggling to process these allegations. From a procedural standpoint, preliminary investigations can take months or even longer, depending on the complexity of the case. Detectives need time to interview all potential witnesses, review any available evidence, and consult with prosecutors about the viability of bringing charges. The fact that we're potentially looking at multiple victims across different time periods means this investigation could be quite extensive.
What's also worth noting is the jurisdiction where this is taking place. Brentwood is an affluent community with a well-resourced police department. They have experience with high-profile cases and the resources to conduct thorough investigations. This isn't a small-town department that might be overwhelmed by the scope of such an investigation. The preliminary nature of this investigation means we're still in the early stages. Police are gathering information and building their case file, but they haven't reached the point where they're ready to make arrests or file formal charges. That doesn't mean they won't get there, it just means they're taking the time to do this right. What's particularly significant about how this investigation is proceeding is the timeline and the legal challenges that come with it. When we're talking about allegations from over 2 decades ago, statute of limitations becomes a critical factor. Tennessee has specific laws about when sexual assault charges can be filed, and these laws have changed over the years. The good news for the alleged victims is that Tennessee eliminated the statute of limitations for certain sexual offenses involving minors in 2006. But that change only applied to crimes committed after that date. This creates a complex legal puzzle for the Brentwood Police Department and prosecutors. They're not just investigating alleged crimes, they're also navigating the legal framework around when these charges can actually be filed. Some of the alleged incidents might fall outside the statute of limitations, while others might still be prosecutable. This is likely one of the reasons why the investigation is taking time and why police are being methodical in their approach. The fact that multiple alleged victims are coming forward is strategically important from an investigative standpoint. Even if some incidents fall outside the legal timeframe for prosecution, they can still provide valuable context and help establish patterns of behavior. Prosecutors often use this type of evidence to build stronger cases around the charges they can actually file. What's also interesting is how modern investigative techniques are being applied to older alleged crimes. While physical evidence from the 1990s and early 2000s might not be available, investigators today have access to digital forensics, cell phone records, financial records, and other types of documentation that might corroborate victim accounts or establish timelines. Social media and digital communications can sometimes provide unexpected evidence, even for older cases. The pressure on law enforcement in this case is immense. We're talking about allegations against someone who was a household name in Christian music circles. There are probably thousands of fans who grew up listening to DC Talk and the Newsboys, and they're watching to see how this investigation unfolds. That public attention can be both helpful and challenging for investigators. It might encourage more potential victims to come forward, but it also means every decision is being scrutinized. From what we can see, the Brentwood Police Department appears to be handling this professionally and thoroughly. They're not rushing to judgment, but they're also taking the allegations seriously enough to open a formal investigation. That balance is exactly what you want to see in a case like this one. The investigation also highlights how much the landscape around reporting sexual assault has changed over the past 2 decades. When these alleged incidents occurred in 1999 to 2003, there was much less awareness about issues like grooming, the dynamics of abuse, and the challenges victims face in coming forward. The cultural shift we've seen, especially in recent years, has created an environment where victims feel more supported in speaking out about experiences that happened years or even decades ago. Law enforcement agencies have also evolved in how they handle these types of cases. There's better training around trauma-informed interviewing, understanding victim behavior, and building cases that rely heavily on testimony rather than physical evidence. These improvements in investigative approach are crucial for a case like this one. As this investigation continues, it will likely set an important precedent for how law enforcement handles historical sexual assault allegations involving public figures in the Christian community. The thoroughness and professionalism of this investigation could influence how similar cases are handled in the future. The ultimate question, of course, is whether this preliminary investigation will lead to formal charges being filed. That decision will depend on what evidence investigators are able to gather, and whether prosecutors believe they can build a case that meets the legal standard for prosecution. But regardless of the final outcome, the fact that law enforcement is taking these allegations seriously and conducting a thorough investigation sends an important message about accountability. What we're witnessing is the justice system working as it should, deliberately, carefully, and with respect for both the rights of the accused and the voices of those who say they were victimized. Whether you're a longtime fan of Christian music or someone who's been following this story from the outside, this investigation represents something larger than just one case. It's about how our society handles allegations of abuse, particularly when they involve trusted figures in religious communities. If you've been following this story or have thoughts about how these types of investigations should be handled, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And if this content has been helpful in understanding the complexities of this case, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss updates as this story continues to develop. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.